Okay, hi Michelle. I'll try and walk through this. Hopefully how I'm looking at this is the same way you are and that we can get this fixed and get you going. All right, so the first thing actually that I already did, let me see if I can go back in here. Database tools, relationships. There was a relationship here, shoot, between the book list and the book ID. And I just need you to delete that. So you need to get rid of that relationship and you just have to click on the black line in between there. Sorry, I thought I had undid everything I had done as I was playing around with this. But all you have to do is click on it and hit the delete button. It'll get rid of that relationship. So that's the first thing I need you to do when you're working through this. All right, next thing, book ID between inventory and book list. All right, so the first thing I always look at when I'm looking at relationships when there's a problem is to make sure that the data type is the same. Now, the problem with this is the data type, in the inventory table is an auto number. No problem. Usually I try and stay away from auto numbers just because they can be a pain. You could still do the same idea of just typing in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But they can, I don't know why, they just can cause trouble. So I typically try and stay away from them, but of course I don't want you to change that now. But just looking at this, I just want to be sure, yep, book ID is an auto number. I'm going to move this up because typically the primary key is the first field. That's probably just more of a weird thing for me. You don't have to move it, but I did. So I'm going to move that in this table. And then I'm going to save it. And so really nothing in the inventory table. All I did is move your book ID. Okay, so now if I go to the book list table where the inventory ID is again, or the book ID is again, in this case you have, oh shoot, I have to close the inventory table here. Okay, so the book ID here is also an auto number, and you can't do that because in this table, in the book list, based on the relationship, the book ID could show up multiple times because you're creating a one-to-many relationship. So in the inventory table, book ID would show up in here only one time. Each of these books is in here only one time. But according to how I'm looking at the setup, since you wanted that relationship there, is in the book list table, it could be in there multiple times. So we can't have this as an auto number. We have to just make it a regular number. Long integer is fine. So just choose number and then save that. And then we can go in and create that relationship. And just to remind you, you have to have your tables closed to create a relationship. So now you can go to book ID, enforce referential integrity, create, and it creates that one-to-many relationship. Okay. Customer ID to customer ID. I think I know what the problem is here. I'll let you do the investigation. When you try to make this, just note the error message that comes up. Enforce referential integrity. We hit create, and it says data in the table inventory violates referential integrity rules. For example, there may be records relating to an employee in the related table, but no record of that for that employee in the primary table. So I know you don't have employees, but they're just giving you an example. And basically what that means is there's probably a customer ID in the inventory table that's not in the customer list, or vice versa. So, and this is the reason why, I know this is so complicated for you guys, and I understand this is hard. But the reason that you're supposed to set up all these relationships before you type any data in, because then Access catches these things along the way and it doesn't allow you to do things like that. But now what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go into both tables. So you'll have to first start with customer list, double check, maybe it's easiest for you to print these out and look at them if you have access to a printer. And then you'll go into your inventory table, and so what you want to look for is two different things. Do you have a customer ID in this table that doesn't appear in the customer list table? Is probably what it is, or vice versa. You have a table, or no, I just said it right. Sorry. You might have a customer ID in here that is not listed in here, and again, that's the beauty behind databases and primary keys is to make sure that you don't have those error messages. So when you have a customer list and you have all of your customer information in here, when you type it in the inventory, like if you had somebody doing data entry and they typed in a customer ID that didn't appear in here, then Access would say, hey, that's not right, and then the person would have the opportunity to go back and fix it. So that's what you want to look for, is there's some discrepancy in here. Something's here that's not here, and that's what you have to double check for that to work. Once you fix that and you save it, then you can go back in and create that relationship again. Okay, the last question then I believe you had was on the employee table. So what I'm going to recommend you do actually is create another table. In the directions, it tells you to have an employee table where you have 2 employees. You have 3, no big deal, it doesn't matter. You can have more if you want. But in this particular case, you cannot make employee ID a primary key because it appears multiple times in this table. So in order to fix that, you can either change up what you want to do with your tables, or you create a whole nother table that just is the employee information. So employee ID, first name, last name, address, that's all you have to do if you want, email, phone number, whatever, something along those lines. And then you would have a fifth table here that you would link the employee ID from the employee table to the employee's worked days. Typically, every table has a primary key in it, but the way that you have this listed, there would be no opportunity for a primary key here. And actually, that's okay. I would let that go, just because, again, this is complicated. I'm not sure how complicated you guys would ever get with these databases in your workplace, but hopefully this at least is giving you some information on how databases work in the background, probably way more than you want to know. But anyway, that's how you're going to have to fix this. So your employee ID for this table cannot be a primary key unless you change it that each employee only appears in here 1 time. Then you could do that. You could make this, the employee, maybe change up your information here instead of days worked, hours worked, and so on. You could just have their information, and then you could link it to the inventory. If you do link those two, just notice you have employee spelled incorrectly here, and Access would say, hey, that doesn't work, it's not the same field. So it would be confused by that. So if you do end up linking these two, just note that. So that would be my suggestion for this. Either rework your thoughts here, and you could take out these fields unless you had them planned for a query or something along the way. If you want to keep that the way it is, you can do that, and then you need to create a whole new table that just is employee information. That would be your employee ID. That's the primary key, and then you would connect that table with this one. And again, if you choose to do it that way, don't worry about putting a primary key on this table unless you can rework this and think of something else that would be your unique identifier, which is always hard to come up with sometimes. I mean, something that cannot be the same anywhere else along, in that table. Okay, so that's what I have for you. I hope that this helps you, helps maybe make sense a little bit more. So again, just a quick recap. First, you had that, at least the file that I opened from this morning, had that relationship between the book list and the inventory. You have to delete that. Then you're going to fix the book ID to be the book ID, and the book list needs to be changed to a number field type. And then you can go back and do the relationship. Customer ID to customer ID, I think the problem there again is that you have a customer ID in here that does not appear in here. So you'll have to go through and just edit, basically look through the details and figure out where the problem is. And then finally, your employee ID here cannot be a primary key. You can't do that. You'll have to create a whole new table, or however you want to adjust that. So I hope this helps, Michelle. If you want to fix all of that and then send it back to me again before you keep going, go ahead and do that, and hopefully you can move along then, and this will all work for you. Take care.